Nothing? Okay, the thumbnail might be a little misleading, but it's kinda true on the surface. In terms of raw long note ability, I'm about the same as from the start of the 30 days. I set up a practice and post-exam map to measure my long note progress throughout the month, and the difference in score has all been within a small margin. Even playing the same map today, I'm not able to really get out of this range. So what happened? Did I not practice hard enough? Is 30 days too short of a time frame? Or am I just that bad at long notes? Well, to fully understand the results of this little experiment, we must first understand how the full long note mod works and what these arguments do. The full long note mod in Soundsphere works differently to how it works in Quaver, or anything that converts a map into full inverse. We have 4 different levels, or presets, that have varying degree of long notes added, as well as different lengths and how much they overlap. FLN 0 is not useful to anyone, so we'll skip it. Seriously, look at this. This doesn't help. In FLN 1 is where this mod actually becomes useful, and the difficulty can vary a lot depending on what other mods and charts are used in combination. For me, I mostly stuck with 4 key charts alternated and then automap to 10, as well as 7 key charts directly automap to 10. Comparing the two, you can see how the 4 key map is mostly a dexterity exercise, as it largely forces the player to do bracket motions, paying attention to the release timings, but virtually no overlap, which won't target the more mental aspects of long notes. The 7 key map is more traditional to what you'd actually see in a map with long notes, and starts to challenge the player's LN ability, along with the finger dexterity needed for these maps. 2 other aspects of charts that affect this mod are speed and pre-existing long notes. When there's a slower section of 1/2 rhythm, the long notes will tend to overlap more, and go on for longer. FLN 1 seems to only want to overlap 1 or 2 notes at the same time, and as more notes come on the screen, you can notice a pattern of the oldest note still on the screen getting ready to be released. When you introduce more 1/4 rhythm into the map, overlaps go away quicker, and the long notes become shorter, taking up less overall space on the playfield. Maps that already have long continuous LN like this are probably my favorite to practice with. These turn the maps into a structure that's common to see in real LN maps, and it trains a bunch of aspects all at once. Notably, the ability to read which note will be held the longest, holding that note, and dealing with the remaining notes on the screen, and then transitioning into the next longest note. The main downside with this is that you need to know all the long note maps would best fit this mod, so I find myself replaying the same few charts over and over. FLN 2 takes everything we've discussed and cranks it to 11. This is ultimately the conclusion of this video and my whole 30 days. It's basically full inverse, but with some amount of negative space in the playfield just to mess with you. Some long notes seemingly go on forever, especially when converting lower key counts, and there's so many points of independency going on between each finger, creating the most insane difficulty curve you can have in this game. Now, I won't go into detail with FLN 3 as I haven't experimented with it yet, but I have created this graphic to help get an idea of the different difficulties we're dealing with. FLN 0 at the way bottom. This is on par with accuracy training, and probably isn't even necessary for most. FLN 1 with 4 key, alt key, automap 10, also at the lower end. Mostly a physical training exercise, and would help the most with learning bracket streams and improving pinky control. Doesn't directly contribute to LN ability. FLN 1 with 7 key, automap 10 key, is a little bit more useful, but also varies a lot depending on the types of maps you play. A good balance would be finding maps with sections like this, as it balances out the long note variance. Speed maps can be fun, but you're shortening the long notes this way, and putting emphasis more on going faster rather than a slow methodic finger control that most beginner LN players struggle with. FLN 2 with 4 key, alt key, automap 10 key, or 7 key, automap 10 key, or 10 key are all about the same. Alternation introduces a bit of repetitiveness and predictive nature of knowing how the mod arranges the notes. 7 key maps would feel more realistic, but can also depend on the charting and create awkward gaps if visuals were the main driving factor of the mapping. 10 key maps would theoretically be the best in terms of what you'd encounter in an actual map, but I have a small amount of playtime with these. On the far end of the spectrum would be FLN 3 and inverse. As I said, I don't have too much experience with FLN 3, but I do know there's probably more negative space than full inverse, and patterns like jacks might remain in the map and not exactly fill every gap in the map. Looking at what we know now, it may seem like a good question to ask, why didn't I just stick to FLN 2 for the month, as that's better in terms of LN practice? Well, 2 things. For one, this difficulty curve is concerning. We all idealize practicing as hard as we can, but there's diminishing returns and maybe even negative effects of going too out of your comfort zone. Even the scoring in Soundsphere, how am I supposed to distinguish 2 scores if they both say 100%? To me, this is the game's way of saying, play something more within your range, and that's not a bad thing. So this got me thinking of ways to mitigate this curve. Playing on lower rates sounds like a good idea, but this can often cause the map to be even harder on average since the long notes become more stretched and the time between finger movements gets longer. So then I thought about, what if you also lowered the scroll speed to compensate for any LN stretching? well then at that point, your reading would be tied to your speed ability, and most of us would rather play with one scroll speed, no matter how fast or slow the map BPM is, outside of SV changes. So maybe in a future update, Soundsphere could add more LN mods to control what's going on, and the true way to lower this curve is by practicing with 1 to 2 to 3 notes overlapping at the same time, so you can progress to more complex patterns without sacrificing speed or awkward reading. What sense would it make to jump all the way here when I haven't even mastered the fundamentals yet? This is exactly the first thing I noticed during my first few days. Sure, FLN 1 and alternation might not be training long notes directly, but does any of that matter when I can't even play this to begin with? It's like the prerequisite. If I can't move my pinkies and ring fingers accurately, then no amount of long notes will be hit. So that was the main thing I decided to focus on during this month. It might seem kind of misleading to say I played long note for a full month, when the patterns I played aren't exactly like long note maps, but it's still technically true, and at least for me, it was a necessary step. If I was just doing 4 key, then this would probably be unnecessary, as I already have decent enough finger control there. But with 10 key, I'm still a new player, so doing any amount of unfamiliar patterns like this felt extremely uncomfortable. But anyway, the month is over now, and did I actually improve? One thing I want to reiterate is that the majority of these maps and patterns are equivalent to high-star maps in OSU. Soundsphere doesn't recalculate adding LN mods on charts, so it can be easy to forget that these actually increase the difficulty by a lot, when everything is marked as a 6 difficulty. When I go back and play regular 10-key maps, I immediately notice a difference in improvement. While I wish I was able to improve faster, I still think this was a valuable month as I could improve other skill sets I lacked that do affect long note ability. Some things like this can't exactly be practiced in isolation, and you can notice how improving in some areas can assist and benefit other areas. Next month, I'll be putting more emphasis on brackets and bigger chord practice, as well as getting more into FLN 2. I'll also be looking at the difference between playing every day versus a few days out the week, as I neglected to mention practice frequency in this video, so expect 2 videos on these topics and how things compare between these 2 months. As I mentioned earlier, FLN 1 seems to only want to overlap. I didn't mention this. Challenge the player's long note LN ability.